Okay, so today we're going over test 87, game 3. This is a little bit more of a difficult test. Oh wait, let me do this. Anyways, as I was saying, this is a little bit more of a difficult test, or sorry, game, but it is doable. And the reason why I say it's a little bit more difficult is this is one where I would probably not create all the worlds and instead maybe create a couple that kind of jump out at me, and get an idea for like how the game is going, like the pattern that's within it, and get like familiar with the rules so I can kind of think about them on the fly, and then diagram whatever needs to be diagrammed, if I need to in some of the questions. So this is a really good game to kind of practice when to stop, because in some of these games we cannot make all the worlds. It's just too time consuming. There's way too many different possibilities. That's frequently in ordering games, but this one's a hybrid game, double sequencing game, I guess you could say. But this is one where I would probably stop making some of the worlds once I kind of feel like I'm comfortable with the game, and then move into the questions. So yeah, let's just get right into it. Okay. So we have, over the course of 4 consecutive weeks, a gallery is going to be showing 3 oil paintings, 3 watercolor paintings. Each painting will be shown at least 1 week, exactly 1 oil painting and 1 watercolor per week. Okay, so this is a pretty typical setup for like a hybrid game, double sequencing game. Basically, we're going to be figuring out which oil painting, which watercolor painting is going to be shown on which week. So I'm going to set it up something like this. I'm going to put my oil paintings on top and my water paintings on bottom. And my oil paintings are G, H, and I. My watercolors are P, R, and S. If you'll notice, and this is something that you should probably notice right off the bat and would be good to start trying to notice this right off the bat, is I have more spaces than I do variables, which means we're going to have repeated variables. And you can also kind of tell that by exactly 1 oil painting and 1 watercolor painting is per week. So that means I'm going to have an extra oil painting and an extra watercolor painting. So it's just something good to know before you get into it. Going into the rules, our first rule is a pretty simple one. It says no paintings can be shown in 2 consecutive weeks. So I can't have 2 P's in a row. I can't have 2 G's in a row. One way that I would represent this, because this isn't really a rule that you can like create worlds off of or directly put into your diagram, I use X to represent variables that I don't necessarily know about. So if I see 2 X's in a row, I can't have that happen. So basically, if I see 2 P's in a row, can't have that happen. I have to make sure that there's something separating them. So yeah, I'm going to notate it like this. The second rule says G cannot be shown in any week in which P is shown. So meaning G and P hate each other. I cannot see them together. Another pretty simple rule. If I have P, I can't have G. If you want to go a step further and kind of think about it a little bit more, if I have P, I'm going to have H or I. And if I have G, I'm going to have R or S. So it kind of is a good idea to kind of like think about what the pairings could look like, just because it makes it a little bit easier once you start placing your variables, but it's not necessary. So going into our next rule, rule number 3 says H must be shown in any week in which S is shown. And this rule is one that you need to read carefully, because rule number 3 does not mean H and S are together all the time. That's not what this rule means. The rule is saying that it's in any week that S shows, then H is going to show. So this actually reads like a conditional statement, which I hate. So basically think of it as, if we have S, we're going to have H. So if I see S, I have to see H with S, meaning H could be paired with R or P, because it doesn't say that H has to be with, must be shown in any week in which S is shown. It doesn't mean that it has to go with S. It could be H and R together. It's just when we have S, we have to have H. And the reason why this is important to read it this way is because we do have that possibility of having a duplicate variable. So we very well could have something like HS here, HP, G and I, and what am I missing? Oops, sorry. This is going to have, let's say R, and I'll do R there too, just for purposes of explaining the rule. I could have something like this. Every time I have S shown, I have H with it. G and P hate each other. I don't have any duplicates in a row, and I haven't gotten to that last rule, so I'm not going to worry about it right now. But technically that could happen. So because I have that duplicate, I can't say that I always have H and S together. It's just when I have S. And moving on to that fourth rule, it says H cannot be shown earlier than the third week unless H is shown in the first, or sorry, I is shown in the first week. So let's take a minute to think about this rule because this has a couple of implications. This rule to me is a little difficult to diagram, and I don't think diagramming it like this, like something like this, would help me in any way. That's why we diagram our rules kind of like this, is because it's going to help us when we go into the game. And this rule in particular, for me, just is a little too complex to really diagram it. And it's one of those rules where I can actually just plop it in there because I only have 4 spaces where I can put H to begin with. And if it can't be earlier than the third week in general, that means that it's going to be the third or the fourth week. However, if I have I in the first week, that means it could be 2, 3, or 4. So really the only thing that I'm really noticing is H can't be 1, and it's either going to be 2, 3, and 4. And when it is 2, we know where I has to go. So this is just one of those rules where I would probably just write it down. So I'm either going to have H in 3, H in 4, and I'm going to cross these out so I know not to potentially do anything over there. And the reason why I'm also crossing out 3 and 4 is because that would mean that they're duplicated together. Can't have any duplicates in a row. And the third world being that H is in that second spot. And when H is in that second spot, we know that we have to have I in number 1. And now I don't even have to worry about it anymore. You could do another world if you wanted to say that H could go into 4, or H is just like, that's the only place that H can go. Sure, I guess, why not? Just so I don't have to really think about this rule anymore. So the way that I'm going to do this is H can't go in 3, H can't go in 4. And over here, I'm going to make this my duplicate. Because I mean, now technically I can kind of finish out this world right here. Because if I have I, H, and H, and I have to have at least one of each painting, that's going to force G to go into that third spot. And I could do a little bit more with 4, but G is going to have to go in 3 or 4. And that duplicate variable is going to be an I, because we can't have 2 G's together, and we've prevented H from happening in that 4th spot. I guess I could put something down there like this. I don't think it really matters. It's just going to matter once we go into that, what the watercolor could be, which at this point I don't really care about right now. So I'm not going to worry about it until I get to it. So I guess I've technically just completed H. I've placed H everywhere that I need to place it. So I don't have to worry about my H variable. Now, that's not to say I don't have to worry about that third rule. I'm still going to have to worry about that third rule, but I don't have to worry about where H goes, which is kind of nice. That means that we can kind of fill in everything else, but we'll get to that in a minute. So this is what I mean by, like, I really probably wouldn't do a whole lot with this game is, I mean, we have a lot of rules. It's, when you think about it, it's going to create a lot of different worlds, because with this S scenario, well, I guess we could put it in since we know where all of our H's are. And by this, I mean, in this first world, we've prevented H from going into 1, 2, and 4. So there's no way that we could have H anywhere in there. So technically, if we think about the rule 3, wherever S is, H is going to have to go. We can figure out where S is going to go. It's going to have to be in that third spot, and it can't be duplicated. Because if it's going to be duplicated, like let's say I put S in 1, that third rule is initiated or like triggered, and I would have to put H into that first spot. So I can't have that happen. So wherever I have 1H, I could just plop in S. Now in this third world, I have 2 options really, because going back to me explaining that third rule at the beginning of the video, S can go in both areas. S could just be in one area. S is going to have to be in at least one of them. But like I said, H doesn't have to go with S. So just because we have H does not mean that we have to have S. In 1, 2, and 4, that does mean that we have to have S because there's no other place we can put S. But in this third world, I have 2 places I can put S. So I guess since we're in the game of trying to eliminate our rules, I'm going to, I feel like I'm going to sneeze. Ooh. I'm going to create 2 worlds because there's really 2 options. Either S appears 1 time or S appears 2 times. So in one of them, I'm going to say S is appearing twice. And in the other one, I'm going to say S appears once, but we don't know which one it goes into. And if it's appearing once, that means I'm only going to have, oh, why did I put G there? Means I'm going to have either P or R in that other spot. So now I don't have to think about that third rule. And technically, I've completely placed S everywhere, so I don't have to think about that really. Okay, can I pick it up and move it? I'm running out of space. Okay, there we go. I think at this point, I would probably just kind of, I mean, the only other rule that we really have is that second rule, because the first rule we can't really do anything with, like we can't really create any worlds based off of it. With that first rule, really the only thing that I can do is something in that third world. I can't have any duplicates. S's are appearing there. G hates P. So that's going to force P to go in 1 and R to go in 3. But we can do something with this second rule. With this second rule, it's kind of, you can it's an inference that we're going to have to make. So if G hates P, and this is where I kind of like get all kindergartner-ish. We have 3 pairings that we could pair up with G. We can have P, R, or S. If G hates P, that means that now we only have 2 pairings, either S or R. But if we think about, what was it? The third rule, every time we have S, we have to have H. That means that G can't go with S either. Because if I'm placing an S somewhere, I have to put an H there. There's no way I can have G and S together. So this rule combined with the third rule actually means that every time we see G, we have to have R. Doesn't mean that every time we have R, we have to have G, because like in this 5th world, we could have R with H, but every time we have G, we have to have R. So if we go into our worlds, we can actually plop down an R. So down here, I can put an R here. This gets a little finicky because G can flip-flop. Hello, pick you up. Okay, so I'm going to make another world down here and split them so I know where G is, so I don't have to think about carrying R over with it as well. So I'm going to put R there, R there. This needs to go there. Is that really? At least right now, that's all that I have on the board. So I can actually go a little bit further, it's kind of like this domino effect. I'm just going to take it as far as I can really take it. So like down here, we can actually figure out that this variable right here cannot be R. Because if I pick R here, that means that I'm going to have two R's. Even if I flip it over to the second spot, I'm still going to have two R's. So we can force P to go here. Where else? Down here, I can do something. Because if I have S and R on both sides and I can't have any duplicates, means I'm going to have P there. I could probably do something in 4 just to kind of finish off the world. If S is in that second spot, that means my empty spot cannot be S, which means it's either going to be P or R. Same with number 4. I'm either going to have P or R. And I can actually further kind of revise that because I don't have a P placed down. So P is going to have to be in one of them. And it's going to flip-flop with, oh, sorry. What did I say? P, oh, actually something else happens. Because depending on where I put P, that duplicate's gonna change. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna say P is a floater, and I'm gonna keep it in my mind that I can't have duplicates. That's fine. Down here, if I have S in that second spot, that means that I can't have S in that first spot, which means it's either going to be P or R again. That's a done one. Depending on who is here in that second spot is going to depend on what could go here. Regardless, R could go there. And like I said, if S is going to here, that means I could have P. But if P is going to go there, it means I could have S. So I'm just going to do something like maybe P/S, something like that. Get creative with it. I think that's about as far as I'm going to go because there's really not much that I can do in 2 or 1. Technically, I could be on 2 and 4 in that first world, or G could be on 2 and 4 in that first world. It creates a lot of different worlds. And quite frankly, I've got a substantial amount that I think I could get through some of my questions and just brute force some of the rest of it. Because I only have I have 7 questions. That's a lot of questions for a game, but I have a good amount of diagrams. So, and the rules, I should also say, and the rules that are left over are not hard to think about. I'm not having to think about that last rule, that third rule, and that second rule all at once. I'm only thinking about G hates P and no duplicates. That's the only thing that I'm thinking about, which is fairly easy to kind of remember. I'm not having to remember that H can't go in 2 unless I is in 1 or anything like that. So the rules that I'm keeping in my mind are pretty basic. So we're going to go into our questions. Move it. Okay. Maybe. Okay. So this is a list question. So the first things that we're going to do is we're going to move our diagrams to the side because I don't want you to use your diagrams on these list questions. Are a lot easier if you just go through the rules. So we have rule number 1 saying no painting can be shown in consecutive weeks. So I'm going to go through and make sure that I don't have any consecutive paintings in a row. A looks good. B looks good. C looks good. D looks good. E is wrong because I got 2 H's in a row. So I'm going to take out E. The next one says G cannot be shown with P. So I'm going to go through and make sure I don't have G and P together. Takes out D. Anytime I have S, I'm going to have H. So SH, SI, I take that one out. SH, that's fine. H cannot be shown earlier than week 3. Unless I have I in that first week. So A is wrong. H is in the second week. I don't have I in that first week. So that's going to lead me to C. Okay, now you can use your diagrams to confirm that that is the correct answer. I'm also going to use my diagram to see if I even have that world, because when we stop making worlds, or when we've gone as far as we can or should go, if we don't have that world, it's a good idea to write it down. So IPGR. I don't have it. So what I'm going to do, move you over there, and I'm going to write it down. Using your diagrams from your questions is very helpful, especially if you don't have all of your worlds. So there could be a question in the future that pertains to this world, or could at least eliminate maybe a answer or two. So it's good to write those down and use your previous diagrams. Okay. Our first question says, if S is shown in the second week, then any of the following could be shown in the third week. So I'm going to look to see if I have any where S is in the second week. I have quite a few. Actually, pretty much all the diagrams that we created are usable. Yeah. Means that this is going to be that. Okay. So I paused because I was just thinking, if S is shown that second week, every time we have S, we have to have H, which means H is going to be in that second spot, which means I is going to have to be in that first spot. So I'm just thinking about how the rules are basically coming together, which is good to do. In the second world, if S is in that second spot, that means that this is going to be between R and P. So that's good to note. That's probably about as much as I would do. Okay, so we have, if S is in the second week, then which one, then any of the following could be in the third week except. So I can have G and R. Going to eliminate G and R, G and R, G and R, I and P, which means H cannot be in that third week, which makes sense. Because if we have S in that second week, that means that H is going to be in that second week, and we can't have duplicates in a row. So you could get to it that way as well. So B is my answer. Which one of the following must be false? S is shown in the first week. I'm picking that because if we think about the implications of the rules again, every time we have S, we have to have H. And we discussed how H can never be first because H is either going to be 3 or 4, or H can be second and I can be first. There's no way that H can be first, which means that S cannot be first. Which means down here, this is still going to be between P and S, or sorry, R and P. Throw that in there. Yeah, okay. That's my answer. We can also go through B and E. H is shown in the second week. I can have that happen here. R is shown in the third week. Same world. I can have that happen there. I is shown in the fourth week. I can have that happen here. P is shown in the fourth week. I can have that happen here. So everything else can happen. S cannot happen in the first week. If G is shown in the first week, which one of the following could be true? Okay, I don't have a world where I have G in the first week. So this is one that we're going to have to diagram. So I'm going to think about this. So we have, grab my pen, G in the first week. And this is something where I would copy this to the side so I'm remembering what my base diagram is. So it's not, I'm not forgetting that it doesn't have to be this certain diagram. So if G is shown in the first week, in this world, it means that I is going to have to go in my second week. R, G, and R together means that P is going to go here. H can't go there, so G or I. Here, we're going to have I flipping between 1 and 3. Depending where I goes, kind of depends on who can't be with I. We're missing P though. P is going to have to go into one of them. Yeah, okay. So let's see what could be true. I is in the 3rd week. That could be true. I like that one so far. P is in the 3rd week. Well, that could be true too. R is in the 2nd week. Can't be true. R is in the 4th week. That could be true too. S is in the 2nd week. That can't be true. So let's see here. G is in the 1st week. If we have G in the 1st week, it means that we have to have R in that bottom spot. Okay, so if we have G in the 1st week, we need to think about the implications of placing the other variables and placing our answer choices basically. So if I is shown in the 3rd week, we need to think about it like this. Place I in the 3rd week. That means that I have this empty space between the two, which means that I can't have G or I, which would force H to go here, and we can't have H before that 3rd week. So it means that we can't have I in that 3rd week. It's a long domino effect. P in the 3rd week, can't do that either. Because if we decide to place P in this 3rd week, that means that S is going to have to come in between here. And if we have S, we have to have H, and we cannot have H. So I don't like that anymore, which means that our only option is R is in the 4th week, which could happen up here. We can put R right here, and that would be fine. So that's our answer. Erase, erase, erase. I would keep these diagrams if I didn't, if I had the space. Okay. Our next question says the schedule of the painting shown in 4 weeks is completely determined if which one of the following is true. Completely determined questions have 2 steps, has to come from a singular world, and you have to know where all the variables are within that world. So G is shown twice. I don't have a diagram of that right now, so I'm going to skip it for now and go back to it if I need to. H is shown twice. I have 2 worlds where that's happening. I could have this world happening PSRS, or I could have RSRPRPRS. So I have 2 different worlds when I have H happening twice. So I'm going to eliminate that. P is shown twice. I'm going to eliminate that too because I have a world down here in 5 where I could have P 2 times. And I could have one over here too. P 2 times, and my top row is different. So eliminate because it's coming from 2 worlds. R is shown twice. I'm going to eliminate that one too. Because I can have a world in 5 where I have R happening 2 times. And I can have that over here in 6 where I have R happening 2 times as well. So eliminate that. S is shown twice. I like this one. And the reason why I like it and why I probably would pick it and not really worry about A is because of the implications. So if we think about S being shown twice, can't have them duplicated. H can't be in 1, which is going to force our 2 S's to go into 2 and 4. So we can't have H there. Because when we have S, we have to have H. And in order for H to be in that 2nd spot, we have to put I here. And in order for then that would force G to go into that third spot, and G has to go with R. Then you're left with not having a P, so you'd have to put P into that first spot. So mentally, that makes sense. I like E. I'm really not going to worry about A because I can prove E forces all of my variables to go into certain spots. If we wanted to, whoops, I could do probably something like G has to go with R. We need a P and we need an I. I could do something like that. So very simple. If you want to test out your answer choices, throw them on the page while following your rules. It doesn't take that long to kind of test answer choices, but if I needed to prove it to myself that A wasn't correct, I could. So I'm selecting E. Okay, the next one says if R is shown in both the second and the fourth week, which one of the following could be true? Do I even have that happening here yet? I don't. Okay, so now I'm going to have to go to my two uncompleted worlds, which is going to force me to use my first diagram because I have S in that fourth spot down there. So I'm going to have R in the second and then the fourth. And now again, thinking about rule 2, just because I have R does not mean that I have to have G. So I can't automatically put G into both of these places. However, one of them is going to have to house G because I have to have at least one G. So I don't really care which one it goes into. They could both be G, totally fine, but I just have to have at least one housing G. Which if we know that G is going to have to go into one of those two places, yeah, I guess I can't really do much more. But in that last row, R, S, I don't have a P. It's going to force P to go into one. And I think that's about as much as I'll do. And then go into the answer choices, see what could be true if I can force anything to go into anywhere. G is in the first week. I guess I could, no, can't make that happen. G hates P. And if I can't have H there, that means I'm going to have I there. So G can't be in that first week. H is shown in the second week. Can't have that happen because then I would have two H's in a row. H is shown in the fourth week. Again, two H's in a row. I is shown the second week. I would have two I's in a row. I could have I in that fourth week because then I could have my one G there. So that's going to be our answer. Okay, substitute question. Hate substitute questions. They're super long. They're super, they're long and they take up a lot of time and they're only worth 1 point. So unless you're getting everything else correct in the section, you're skipping substitute questions, you're picking a letter and moving on, you're not worrying about it. However, if you want to master substitute questions, which I would recommend when you're getting like a 21 and a 23 correct, I'll go over the substitute question. So substitute questions has 2 phases again. So the first phase is eliminating anything that does not match up with your world. So let's say it said something like H could only go into that third spot. I could eliminate that because I can make that false. I can have a world where H doesn't have to go to that third spot. So if I had picked that, it's going to create different worlds and I have to create the exact same worlds that I have. That's the first phase. That's a fairly easy phase to go through. You're basically just kind of going through and seeing what doesn't have to be true. The second phase is where people really kind of get stumped because we can have 2 answer choices that have to be true, but doesn't necessarily implicate what the original rule is implicating. When we're substituting a rule, it means that we're basically putting in an exact replica. So if it's forcing something to happen, then that means that the new rule is going to force the same things to happen. And that's really what you have to think about is basically, can I break my original rule if I'm substituting this? And if I can break my original rule, it means that it's not forcing what it should be forcing. So let's go over it. Hopefully this isn't too mushy for you. So the first rule says, which one of the following, if substitute for the condition that G cannot be shown in any week in which P is shown, would have the same effect. So when I do substitute rules, I always rewrite the original rule so I can focus my mind again. G hates P. That's what we're trying to substitute, is that G hates P. I'm going to go over the steps with this question, but this is also a thing that we've already discussed, because if we look over here, thinking about what the rule forces to happen, it forces G, every time we have G, that we have to have R. So I can predict that anytime we have G, we have to have R, and I can probably look through and find that on there. That would be A. R must be shown any week in which G is shown, aka if G is shown, R must be shown. That's basically what we've been talking about this whole time. So this is actually kind of one that we can predict because we've talked about it. However, let's go over the phases so you can kind of see how to work them. So first phase is eliminating the ones that are not or do not have to be true. So answer choice A, R must be shown in any week in which G is shown. That pretty much happens every time we see G, we have to see R. So I'm going to keep that one. G must be shown in any week in which R is shown. Does not have to be true, because like we talked about, specifically if we look at this world, I think this world's an easy one to kind of picture it. We could have R with I. So every time R is shown, we do not have to have G. We could have it paired with another one. So because it does not have to be true, means we can eliminate it. To go further, if I picked B, it would mean I wouldn't be able to use this world. It would mean I couldn't be paired with R. So it's creating a different world, basically. If P is not shown in the first week, then S must be shown no earlier than the third week. P is not shown in the first week. S, I'm gonna find a diagram where that happens. I'm gonna go with R or 5 again, because that's what we were looking at. P, oh wait, sorry, no, well, yeah, okay. I'll say R is happening here. P is not shown in the first week. Then S must be shown no earlier than the third week. Does not have to be true. I could have S in that second spot. So because I can make it false, I'm going to say that that's wrong. If P is shown in the first week, then I must be shown also in the first week, okay? P in the first week, P in the first week, P in the first week. I could put P in the first week here. I mean, that does kind of have to be true so far, according to the diagrams that I have, because every time I have P, I'm going to have I. So has to be true. I'm going to leave it as is. And E, H cannot be shown in any week in which R is shown. So if I have R, I cannot have H, which has to be true. Every time I have R, I'm going to have G. There's no way I could have R and H together. Well, yeah, I guess as of right now, that's kind of what my diagrams are showing me. So I'm going to leave it as is. Yeah, I'm going to leave it as is for now. So now we're at least down to A, D, and E. So if you can at least go through and see which ones don't have to be true, you can at least narrow down your answer choices, give you a chance. And it only takes you about maybe 30 seconds to go through them. It's fairly easy because it's just like a must be true. But the second phase is making sure that it's going to force the thing to happen. So basically we cannot have G and P together. So if we're going to look at, let's look at E first. H cannot be shown in any week in which R is shown. Can I break my original rule? Does that mean that I could still put G and P together? So let's say that I do R here, I here, G, P, G, S. No, can't do S there. P. I could do that. According to E, H is not shown any week in which R is shown. All of my variables are happening. When I have S, I have to have H. None of them are duplicates. But because I can still eliminate my, or sorry, violate my original rule, it's not forcing what that original rule is forcing to happen. I can still break that original rule. G and P can be paired up if H is not shown with R. So because I can make it happen, means that E is not our answer. D, if P is shown in the first week, then I must also be shown in the first week. Let's see if we can break our original rule. Can I put G and P together? P is shown in the first week. I is shown in the first week. G, P. Well, now I can put H there. R. I can still break that rule. All of my variables are happening once. When I have S, I have to have H. No duplicates. H is allowed to go second because I have I in that first spot. So I'm still violating my original rule. So even though I can violate my original rule, D, or because I can violate my original rule, D is not going to be my answer. It's not forcing G and P to break apart. Which leaves me with what I predicted. Answer choice A, R must be shown in any week in which G is shown. So let's try to break our original rule. Let's do G. Oh, sorry. Let's try. Woohoo. G, R, I, H, P. You can have H and P together, right? Yeah. And, oh, can't do S, but I can do R. Yeah. Basically, A is the correct answer because it's going to force G and P to be split up, and it's going to force G to be with R, which is what that second rule is doing, combined with our third rule. Every time we have S, we're going to have H, but G and P hate each other, which is going to force G to go with R. That's the only option that it can go with. So A is going to be my answer. Okay. Again, substitute questions are very confusing. They take up a lot of time. They're not worth it, in my opinion, if you don't feel skilled in it, because it's worth 1 point and it takes longer and you can get more points by starting the next game. So this game was, in my opinion, a little bit harder than what we usually do. This honestly is a pretty challenging game. So if it's confusing at all, please let me know. I feel like I kind of went through it a little fast. So if you need me to explain on anything further, I can do so. I think this game is it's a good game to try to practice moving your variables around, because you can see that we didn't necessarily need to diagram out all of our diagrams in order to answer the majority of our questions. We might have had to diagram out maybe 1 or 2 questions, but in my opinion, that is less time than having to diagram out all the other diagrams that we could possibly have. So yes, if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, see you next week.